Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by writer-director Nathan Silver, whose film Between the Temples explores aspects of Jewish identity in a zany yet heartwarming comedy. It is the story of a cantor who, after the loss of his wife, struggles with his faith and seems to have lost his purpose in life, unable to continue his duties in synagogue davening before his congregation. Let us start with the Kabbalat Shabbat service, led by our very own Cantor Ben.
Yadid. Nah. You should probably fire me. I would fire me.
We're not going to do that then.
Because my moms are both big donors to the temple.
That is not a small consideration.
Keep going! Come on. What are you looking at?
Nothing.
You calling me nothing?
Are you okay?
Mrs. O'Connor.
Do I know you?
Benjamin Gottlieb. You were my music teacher.
Huh.
I work down at Temple Sinai. I'm a cantor.
So interesting, because I'm an Aquarius. We're opposite.
Cantor.
Dr. Plotnick is unattached.
You know my daughter, Gabby.
Gabby Benjamin.
Gabby.
Hi, I'm Leia. I'm here for our J date.
Excuse me? Mrs. O'Connor. Hi.
This is a bat mitzvah class. I saw it on the website.
So you want to have a bar mitzvah?
Jeez, Benny, you're a sharp one.
Your mother has decided to have her bat mitzvah, and I'm going to give it to her.
This is classic Carla.
What's so
This
funny?
is hilarious, Mom.
You can sing. I heard you sing.
I can't sing, but I can't sing.
Come on, you got a big voice in there.
Oh!
That's the voice. That's the voice.
She might be able to handle
Rabbi,
this.
if anyone can do it, it will be her. Carla just taught me that music is the sound you make.
I want you to be happy.
It's okay to be loud and to be sloppy.
What's the matter?
There's cheese in this meat?
Yeah,
That's not kosher.
those two things, they go together so well.
Why are you in my pajamas?
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
The film was inspired by Silver's own mother, who has appeared in a variety of acting roles in many of his films, including this one. He learned that she had signed up for an adult bar and bat mitzvah program and began developing a fiction film with his writing partner, C. Mason Wells, about a later-in-life bat mitzvah student and her cantor teacher. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to be screened at the Berlin Film Festival and the Tribeca Film Festival. It stars Jason Schwartzman and Carol Kane. This is Silver's 9th feature film, and he made his first feature at age 25. The New Yorker recently called Nathan Silver a modernistic master of melodrama and said that he proves himself to be one of the most original American independent filmmakers working today. Nathan, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
Thank you so much for having me.
A Jewish film, isn't that dangerous? I mean, this is your 9th film. There have been little Jewish pieces along the way, but...
I feel like my whole sense of humor and sensibility comes from, from Jewish humor and, Mel Brooks, Albert Brooks, Woody Allen, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld, all these things have influenced my work, and it just seemed like high time to get back to that world. I'd explored it once before in my 3rd film, Soft in the Head, and I wanted to return, I suppose, and my mother gave me the reason to do so.
And she actually said to you, do it, don't do it?
It's funny, when I start working on scripts with Chris, my co-writing partner, I only tell my parents so much of what I'm doing. I'll say certain things are influenced by parts of their lives or people they know, but I don't go into full detail. But she was pleasantly surprised to see that there were aspects of her in the character of Carla.
Carla and Ben seem to have this special relationship, but the mother or mothers in the film are pivotal, are so central. Is there any relationship and in terms of your own growing up and what was happening there?
I feel like in Judaism, the mother looms large over everything you do. And I think there's, it's a great joke to have two Jewish mothers because that's something else, right? I mean, like two people who are going to be watching everything you do and making sure that you're living up to who they think you should be.
It's funny that historically, as well Jewish mothers have typically been made fun of. Yes. You didn't make fun of them. They were really quite real and lovable, and particularly his stepmother is very zealous in terms of her Judaism.
Well, and that came, I think it comes from the whole process of how we make movies. Chris and I, we write what we call scriptments, which is between a treatment and a script. It reads like a novella. So when the actors initially read the scriptment, they come to it with all their ideas. They don't feel like they have to drag this script, the weight of the script behind them. So they really humanize the characters, I feel. It allows them some free reign. Of course, when we start shooting, after discussing at length with each actor, we script all the dialogue and we come to set with the dialogue. But that shifts as we see what works and what doesn't. And we want it to feel authentic as to the person who's going to be representing the character.
Historically, your actors have always, first of all, felt that you were an actor's director, but that laying a script in front of them a day before shooting,
yes,
is a little. They love it. I mean, each and every one of your actors keeps saying, "Oh my God, I was petrified." He handed it to me, and I didn't have time to study it, but I loved it because they were part of it. Talk a little bit more about how you came into doing this.
Well, I'd made a bunch of short films that were heavily scripted, and I felt like I had the direction was too heavy-handed, and my first feature was the same. And so after my first feature was rather disastrous in many ways, I felt with my second feature I wanted to go back to some of the freedom that I'd been exploring with experimental theater back in college. And what you start to see over the course of a film shoot is things like there's more intrigue and interest happening outside of like what you've scripted than what the reality starts to bleed in to the film, and I wanted to be able to capture that in the film itself, so that kind of chaos, that life, because you have like 40 plus people gathered together, and there's going to be all sorts of, it goes off the rails in beautiful ways, beautiful and unexpected ways, and so I wanted to capture that in front of the camera and make that a part of the whole process. And that's, how I've been now making films for the last however many years, over a decade at least, and it's proven, it sometimes scares my collaborators, but I think in the end, they, by the end, they have faith in it, and it has life to it, which is what I want more of in movies: life and humor, things to be truly felt and lived in.
That first feature, you say bombed?
Yes, it just didn't get into festivals, and I think the response, it didn't resonate emotionally, and I think I was just too heavy-handed. I went in with this idea that I tried to execute exactly like according to my brain rather than my heart.
Your main character in the film also seems to fall and picks himself up.
Yes.
And that seems to be like an underlying theme, especially in these days where people need to pick themselves up after having fallen. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And
I think that I've always lived by this mantra, faith in the absurd. You have to have faith in the absurd. I think it comes from Kierkegaard. I don't remember. I assign it to him because I read a lot of him when I was in my late teens, early 20s. But it's always, you have to have, even no matter how despairing everything is in front of you, you somehow have to see something beyond that, or you just have to operate as though there is something beyond that. And I think, with Ben, at first, it's unclear what's in front of him. He's lost his wife. He's lost his voice. He has no purpose. He's lost his faith. But there's that absurd element in him that he continues to go on. He continues to try in some manner, even if he's failing. And, you know, then Carla helps him out of that rut. And it's, you know, it's the mystery, the wonder of life that you occasionally come across people who help you out of, you know, out of your own way, I suppose.
Was there a figure like that in your professional career along the way who sort of gave you that lift?
I would say that there have been many, you know, including this festival programmer, Chris Fujiwara, who is working at Edinburgh, and he saw in my second feature, which was made for all of like $5,000, Exit Elena, he saw in it something that delighted him, I guess, and he pushed it. It was his first year as head of Edinburgh, and he pushed it to all the trades and had them, you know, include the photo, and then all the programmers at other festivals were intrigued by this. So it's people like him who've helped out, because my first feature didn't go anywhere, so I didn't expect my second to either. And I'd already shot my third because I didn't expect my second to go anywhere. So it's like, I just wanted to make and make and make because I didn't want to get bogged down.
You were knocking them out year after year,
Yes.
one a year. It was crazy.
Yes. And that comes from like a mania to create and not let, you know, festivals or release it, or, you know, theatrical releases and how badly a film performs get in the way of you continuing to create and allowing yourself to make, which is, you know, it's an honor and a joy to be able to be on a set and to do that, you know. And if you have enough, I had an energy, you know, I feel myself a bit more tired now. I don't have that same mania, I think. As with age comes a kind of weariness of sorts, but also, you know, my last film was my biggest film in terms of crew size and budget, and I'm very proud with where it's going. It doesn't, I mean, the other films were made with a youthful madness, I guess, you know?
You pride yourself on being an independent filmmaker.
Yes.
You shot this film, just for our audience who may not even understand this.
Sure.
You shot it in 16 millimeter.
Yes.
I mean, today people are shooting most of the films on video or 35 millimeter. You actually did have an experience with
Yes.
35 millimeter. But 16 millimeter is something that typically college students use when they're making their films. Why?
We wanted it to have the analog quality of Carla. We wanted it to have the warmth that film brings and, you know, that Carla brings to Ben's life.
Carla being the Carol Kane character.
Yes. And in order to achieve that, we didn't want it to be video. It had to be film. And I said from the beginning to all the actors and producers that it had to be film, and everyone, the actors were so excited. It got them, you know, for some reason, the idea of shooting this on film, even though it was going to be partially improvised, made it an even more, you know, like dangerous prospect, but also a more exciting one.
And they loved it. They just dug into it. And you even went so far as to choose a rare Kodak film stock?
Well, we pushed it 2 stops. So we treated
Explain that to the audience.
We pushed it 2 stops. So I'm terrible with the technical junk around film.
That's the role of your cinematographer.
Yeah, the role of my cinematographer. But what it did is it made it less contrasty, and it kind of gave it this look of these Soviet films that we used as our guidepost for what it should feel like, because we were watching these films by like Larissa Shepitko and Kira Muratova, and there are these like desolate landscapes, but they feel somehow warm and inviting, and we were wondering how to achieve that. And Sean, my brilliant cinematographer, suggested we try this, and so we did some tests, and indeed it did achieve that.
And it's beautifully filmed. Just really.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sean is like, you know, Jason always calls him another actor on set. He's reacting to everything the actors are doing, and I think that's why so many people love working with him and love his work, is because it's very reactive in the best possible sense. He knows where the emotion is going to be, and his camera's always there to capture it.
You were able to bring Jason Schwartzman into the production, and Carol Kane. I mean, these
Yes.
are 2 major actors. What was it like working with them? And also from a Jewish perspective. Jason has spoken about how this really made him go back and relook at his own Judaism.
Yeah, I think that, at first he was a little apprehensive to play a cantor because he felt like he hadn't really,
I mean, my gosh, he sings Yedid Nefesh at the beginning of the film.
So I think that we had to discuss that a lot, and then we had a Jewish consultant who was helping us with all things Jewish. He was helping with production, but also he happens to tutor kids for their
what a wonderful thing to be able to watch a film where all the Jewish pieces are correct.
I know, and and you can thank Jesse for that. He really he came through, and he was watching everything. He was always with his hawk eye. It was delightful to have him on set and all throughout pre-production. And working with Jason, he's a delight. He and I had conversations for a year before he officially signed on. And then once we had him, we were trying to figure out exactly, because it was written for Jason. And we didn't know who was going to play Carla. And I was on my honeymoon, I had COVID. And I was in a feverish sleep. And for whatever reason, Carol Kane popped into my brain. And I wrote to all my producers and to Chris Wells. And I said, it has to be Carol Kane. And everybody wrote back like, oh, duh. Like, she was right there in front of us when we were looking past her.
Carol Kane, of course, who we remember as far back as, Hester Street and all the wonderful performances that she's given.
She's just out of this world, and then she luckily had always wanted to work with Jason ever since she'd seen him in Rushmore. And so we set up a Zoom call with me, Jason, and Carol. That was the first time I met her. And I saw their two video blocks on my screen, and they were going back and forth. They had this immediate rapport. They had never met, and I knew we had a movie, no matter what, because they have something between them, this chemistry that you can't. There's no way to fake or or manufacture. It was there.
And now let's take a look at a clip from Nathan Silver's film Between the Temples.
Hey, buddy! Hey, you! You can't just run out of me that way!
I'm not running. I'm walking.
Okay,
Ben! What is this?
Everything's fine, Rabbi Bruce. I'm working something out with a new congregant
Well,
here.
I don't know about that, Benny, because I do not feel welcome in this temple.
No. All are welcome at Temple Sinai. I'm Rabbi Bruce.
Rabbi Bruce, good to meet you. I want to have my bat mitzvah lessons specifically with Cantor Benny here. Now that can be accommodated, can it?
I don't see why not.
You see that? Now that wasn't so tough, was it? I guess I'll see you next week, Benny.
Can you back? Oh, you know what? I'll back.
In the film, Carol Kane had been his music teacher as a child.
Yep.
And now she asks him to be her bat mitzvah teacher.
Yes.
So he's teaching her not just the Torah reading and Nusach, but teaching her about Jewish life and Judaism.
Yes.
In the course of the film, were you learning yourself more about what it was to be a Jew? And how did this make you feel?
Yes, absolutely. I grew up in a very secular household. My mother was raised by two socialist parents, two atheists, and she never really went to temple. My father was bar mitzvahed, but he hated going to Hebrew school, felt like it was a chore. And so I maybe went to temple once or twice as a kid. We would have seders, and we would light the menorah, but it was Judaism was more associated with just like I said before, like a sense of humor, sensibility, culturally Jewish, because I grew up in this very Irish Catholic town outside of Boston. I was actually the only Jew in my school, but my parents were New York Jews. They were raised in Queens, so they felt proud to be Jewish, but also not the religious version of it, just the cultural version. So for me, I learned a lot throughout the whole process, and it kind of, I went to a Seder this year, for instance. Like, I am getting back to some of the things that maybe I had neglected over the last, throughout my adulthood and childhood.
Fascinating. And your mom's choice to become a bat mitzvah at an older age?
Yes. Well, she actually didn't follow through with it. She dropped out of the class. But she's still a big part of the temple and does a lot of community work with them. The Blue Fridge, they deliver all sorts of, they do all sorts of charity work
Beautiful.
At the temple. And she goes there for services. I think it's more that she found a community. They just moved to upstate New York from the Boston area, and they were looking for some way to connect with people, and they happened upon this temple. And then I think my mother found herself a bit pressured to take this, to become a bat mitzvah, and it was funny because when they found out that she hadn't had one, they were like, "Oh, you must," and and then she felt. I think she was more interested in just the social outreach community aspect of it, though.
And you enjoy inserting her in your films, although I understand in a few cases you actually cut her out of some films,
did.
and then you went ahead and you used that to have a documentary and a little
Yes.
mini-series.
Yes. So yeah, she played a big role in my movie Exit Elena, my second feature, and then in Uncertain Terms, and she would appear in all my movies, and then I made this film called Actor Martinez that I co-directed with Mike Ott in Denver, Colorado, and we filmed a whole sequence with her there, and we ended up cutting it out, and she was very angry at me, very upset.
Bad son.
And it just lasted for months, and she would not forgive me. So I then approached a good friend, a documentary filmmaker, who was like, well, I was like, what should I do with this? I feel like there's something here. Is there a documentary that we could make? And he's like, absolutely, I'll produce it and I'll be the DP. And I was like, great.
DP meaning director of photography.
Exactly. So we shot a little series called Cutting My Mother, and for Topic Studios. And it was, I think, it was almost to make up to her the fact that she'd been cut out. And then in that series, I had her make her own film and try to make the editorial decisions for her own film, and to see how hard it is to, what you're actually up against, that it doesn't have to do with the performance per se or her as a person. It has to do with making the movie work.
As a youngster, did you always want to be a filmmaker?
It's odd. I made a short film called Riot, where I'm trying to direct a film about the LA riots weeks after they'd happened, when I was like 9 years old at my birthday party. Because the news was always on, and so I was like, oh, let's do something from the news. It was odd for me to do that, but I then turned that into a short film. And so I guess and my father had gone to film school, graduate film school and he studied under Stan Brakhage. Wow. And Ken Jacobs and all these.
These are the great avant-garde experimental filmmakers.
Indeed. And he dropped out because it was far from where my mother was, and she threatened to leave him if he didn't. It was in Binghamton, and she was still in Queens. So he was a film school dropout, and he always had, growing up, he always had films he was recommending to me. He showed me Un Chien Andalou, the Buñuel Dali movie, when I was like 8 or 9. And it changed my brain.
For an 8-year-old to be watching that film.
It was because I was obsessed with Dali's artwork at that time. And he's like, oh, he made a movie that I remember from film school. And he showed it to me and he was horrified. But, when the eye is cut, that's an image that is tattooed to my brain. And so there were elements of film throughout my life. They showed me a lot of Rohmer when I was like a teenager.
Eric Rohmer.
Yeah, because I was very into French literature at that time, and I didn't think that I wanted to go into film. I wanted to do poetry, and then it was experimental theater, which I went to New York University for. But while there, I interned for Richard Foreman at the Ontological Hysteric Theater. He was a hero of mine, and he basically told me that this was back in 2002-ish, 2003 maybe. He told me, experimental theater is dead, no one cares anymore, make films. And so I was like, he's like, I've always wanted to make films, and I'm like, I've made a few, but I wish I had been a filmmaker. I was like, well, interesting. And then, the theater was around the corner from Kim's Video on St. Mark's.
Oh, boy.
I would go there every day and take out whatever he recommended, be it Pasolini, Fassbinder. He would just, Manuel de Oliveira. He had a whole list of filmmakers for me to explore, whose filmography I should explore. And it kind of changed my whole way of thinking. And then I think it was Pasolini that really pushed me over, just because the movies were they haunted me. Something about his camera work, and I couldn't shake a lot of them. So I wanted to make movies, and I switched majors from playwriting to screenwriting, and I wrote 3 feature-length scripts over the course of a year in order to make that happen. And as soon as I got out, I started just making short films.
Wow.
So it's kind of like it was always in my life, but it wasn't like that's what I dreamed of being since the time I was a little kid.
Now let's get to one of the difficult subjects. As much as I think your writing partner called this a traumedy.
Yes.
Because there's trauma.
Yes.
There's depression. There's mental health issues going on here. You really delve into this in an intro. How do you weave such difficult topics into a film that's also humorous and fun and zany?
I think it's all part of life. I mean, you look at Mike Leigh movies, and I think for the most part, Mike Leigh movies for me are extremely entertaining. And no matter what kind of despairing thing a character is going through, there's a hope in there because there's humanity to all his characters. And I think that if you can find the absurdity and the humanity in the tragic, you are tapping into what life is. So it's always a balancing act, and I feel like comedy depends on some kind of drama to hold it up. And here it was just these characters seemingly had to be going through these things, and we're all going through our own crises, I feel. And it's becoming more apparent as if you go on Twitter and read people's breakdowns, I feel like every other tweet is someone just talking about how they're suffering. So many of them are.
And the world around us is not making it any easier.
Yes. So, I feel like it's just part of it's part of the human condition. So you can't really avoid talking about it.
I don't want to spoil anything. I'm really against you having spoilers. But the film does conclude with a Shabbat dinner.
Yes.
I understand you shot it with 2 cameras.
Yes.
And you shot it, over 3 days?
It was 2 nights.
2 nights.
Yep.
Can you just, without giving away what happens, can you just talk about how this is everyone sitting around a Shabbat table.
Yes.
They're not sitting around Thanksgiving table. They're not sitting around a Christmas, tree. They're at Shabbat.
Yes. We had we had 3 different scripted versions of the scene that the first one the actors were very into, the second one not so much, and the third one was a combination. And we shot all 3 versions, and then Jason came up with this idea that I won't spoil, that's a big part of it. And our editor basically used all of the variations in order to build it into a 3-act structure, because it's a long scene. The initial cut of it was like close to a half hour.
Wow.
So, but there was a lot of chaotic energy coming from the fact that everyone, it was like Talmudic scholars almost arguing over like what this, because it's the climax of the movie, what this should be. And so it turned, everyone was very passionate about what their character would do and wouldn't do. And like they were, it fed into the kind of energy that the scene has. And just, I don't know that the scene could have been shot any other way. And I'm extraordinarily proud, and I know our editor, John McGarry, said it's the best thing he's edited.
But he had a chunk of work to do.
He had a chunk of work to do, and everyone told him it was going to be a chunk of work. They're like, have you gotten to the Shabbat scene yet? And he's like, I keep hearing about this. What's the deal with this Shabbat scene? He's like, it's not going to be that bad. Then he started looking at the footage. He's like, oh my God. Like it was a mountain. But in the end, he cracked it. I remember being at I was at a friend's dinner one night. I left the edit, and he wrote me his idea of how to fix it, and I just was like, "That's brilliant." And he mined all the footage, and he found what we have.
Talmudic scholarship on his part.
Exactly.
Nathan, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is truly a delight.
For me too.